What if I told you that the coveted Andariel Quest Bug that was supposed to be fixed during the release of Diablo 2 Resurrected was purely superficial and they only altered game data? And because of this, it is now causing treasure class overriding issues relating to Terrorized Andy. Stay a while and listen as I take you through an empirical journey showcasing what has transpired and an easy solution to avoid this in the future when grinding Terrorized Andariel. First, a brief history lesson. For those who are not familiar with the Andariel Quest Bug, it was a situation in Lord of Destruction where it gave you the ability to permanently increase the chances of dropping more unique items from Andy as opposed to dropping junk like keys, arrows, and potions. And the way to effectively bug Andy was upon slaying her, taking a portal, and immediately going to Warriv and heading east without physically leaving the game. And in this situation, you had just permanently quest bug Andy. The inverse of this effect would be upon fighting and slaying Andariel. If you were to leave the game immediately, or if you were to head to town to talk to another NPC and not click on Warriv and head east, then you would have been permanently non-quest bugged. Now that you understand how to quest bug Andariel, let's take a live look at the game data, which is foundational to explaining what we believe is occurring. The screen up behind me is actually a live treasure class pull down from Lord of Destruction. So what you're going to quickly see here is the normal, nightmare, and hell treasure class information for Andy, but very importantly, the three situations where you have these lowercase q's, which represent the quest, which is the first time you slay Andy, which was then providing you a better treasure class group table by avoiding junk and giving you possibly better uniques. This is why it was so critical and vital in the past in Lord of Destruction to go through that bugging process, which would then perpetually guarantee you that it would always pull from this table by overriding the non-quest drops, and you were always getting better loot. Now, as we transition here to this TCX table, this is now a live look at the Diablo 2 Resurrected client-side TCX information, which was a recent pull down. And there's a couple things to call out here. So again, think about this for a second, that when the game was released in September 2021, again, the developers talked about the bug was fixed. Everybody talked about the bug being fixed. But the reality is all they basically did was artificially hard code the lowercase q, as you can see here, by permanently overriding the non-quest situations, just like you saw in Lord of Destruction, but the difference was you had to physically go through the quest bug. The second thing introduced here in Diablo 2 Resurrected due to patch 2.5 in October was, of course, the introduction of terrorized zones, which also brought Sunder Charms and those desecrated treasure class groupings, which effectively was the ability for bosses and super uniques to monster level scale for the first time versus static and upgrade their treasure classes in certain instances, especially Andariel, across normal, nightmare, and hell. So let's talk a little bit about our best educated guess on what we think is happening. So in order to do that, I'm going to pull this down and pull up a very helpful guide. Thanks to Zach for putting this together so I can walk you through mechanically, again, what's occurring. So let's assume for a second that most of you have done the quest bug. It's just very native to our gameplay experience. Everyone is just so used to doing it from Lord of Destruction. So let's say you have quest bug Andy passively, and now Andariel is terrorized, and we're going into normal. In that standard situation, let's say she was scaled at her full maximum capacity. In Terrorized Andy, she should be able to scale up to TC 51. However, if you have passively quest bug and gone through that mechanic, unfortunately, it ends up capping and restricting you in normal at TC 15. Now, the reason we believe this is happening is that, again, because it was artificially hard-coded, the game believes it is a quest bug slay experience, and thus it is overriding the desecrated treasure class tables, and thus it is not allowing you to group upgrade. Now, of course, if she wasn't terrorized, as we just showed earlier, she's quest bug regardless, and so you would still be getting the better drop tables versus the non-loot. Now, as we work our way down through this chart, let's say you didn't quest bug Andy. So for whatever reason, you slayed Andy in Diablo 2 Resurrected, you left the game, you talked to another NPC, thus you were non-quest bugged. In this same scenario, if you went to do Terrorize Andariel in normal, you would finally get the benefit of the desecrated treasure class, which would then itself override the artificial hard-coded quest situation, thus busting through the glass ceiling and finally enabling you to actually group upgrade into that treasure class. So This is a critical finding. I'm very happy that Zax and them tested this and pointed this out. This means that on season 3 and moving forward, it is imperative across normal, nightmare, and hell, the first time that you're slaying Andy, to make sure that you avoid the quest bug by slaying her and leaving right away, which gives you the maximum potential for loot, both in a non-terrorized and a terrorized situation. And now we're about to jump into active gameplay highlights that can actually physically show you what's occurring in Diablo 2 Resurrected, so you can do this moving forward. Now that the gameplay experience has concluded, I wanted to pull up this itemized ledger that I took, which tracked the drops from both the Barbarian and the Sorceress examples in this content, so you can see with very conclusive evidence that this is a real thing and that the bug passively still exists. Very quickly looking at the summary of the Barbarian, there was not a single weapon or armor that ever exceeded TC 12 in this situation of these examples, where conversely for the Sorceress, again, who was non-quest bug, she had items all the way up possibly to TC 51, with her most maximum drop in the final run being the Naga, which was from weapon 48. Well, there you have it, Sanctuary. I'm glad I was able to bring some exposure and transparency to the fact that the passive quest bug absolutely still exists and it was never physically fixed or patched, because you don't want to be in this situation when you are online in hell doing Terrorized Andy and you actually have the potential through Desecrated for the first time on Andy to drop a potential Tyrael's Might. Because remember, if you do quest bug her, you're going to be restricted to a lower treasure class table. So please avoid this in the future, or else I'm going to say I told you so.